But now, if you don't mind, John, I want to replace you here and bring aboard a very interesting chap that we've gotten to know in preparing for this convention. This is a gentleman here who made me second guess what I knew about the Muppets and Jim Henson. Because of course, when you say it connects to Jack Benny, my eyes light up, and it's like a dog whistle. But ladies and gentlemen, this is the one and only Mr. Craig Shemin. And Craig, you brought to the convention a very interesting thing, and I'm going to take myself out of the equation and give you control of this room for the next allotted time here.
As Zach said, this is all about Jack Benny and Jim Henson. And I've been a Jack Benny fan for a long time. I'm a fan of Jim Henson's. And throw in Billy Wilder, and that's sort of the creative inspiration trinity in my world. And today we're going to talk about the connections between Jim Henson and Jack Benny. And like many of you, I didn't realize that there were connections until not too long ago. And I'm talking about not just the passing references that may pop up.
Enough already! Wow. Can I get back with my training here?
Well. Oh, you're an unusual animal, Big Bird. What kind of a bird are you anyway?
Well.
Well.
I love it.
Now, first, little bit about myself, and that is myself a long time ago. After college, I was fortunate enough to get a job working for Jim Henson's company. That's a picture of me in the Henson Company archives. And I got to spend a little time with Jim Henson. This was before my major Benny fandom took hold. So I never had a chance to discuss Jack Benny with Jim in the few discussions that we had. And at that point, I didn't know about any of the Henson-Benny connections. I started writing for the characters shortly before Jim passed away, and I was on staff at Henson for 14 years, working on everything from guest appearances to show scripts to the tags that go on licensed products, and I still do some Muppet work from time to time. And I serve as president of the Jim Henson Legacy, a nonprofit organization founded by Jim's wife, Jane Henson. And now let's talk about creative inspiration. Today, Jack Benny continues to inspire creative artists. Now, a performer and creator I sometimes work with, David Rudman, produced a show called Jack's Big Music Show for Nick Jr. a few years back. The main characters were named Jack, Mary, and their dog Mel. And those four characters you see there, that's the Schwartzman Quartet, which provided music performances. And I assure you these connections were not a coincidence. David was inspired by Jack Benny and Jack Benny program. And another fun fact, that Jack's Big Music Show was produced only about 30 minutes away from Waukegan, Illinois, as David lives in the Chicago area. Another fun fact, my wife, Stephanie DeBruzzo, appeared as Gertrude the Groundhog on the Groundhog's Day episode of the show, but that has nothing to do with Jack Benny. As for me, about 15 years ago, I wrote a series of 3-minute interstitial cartoons for the Disney Channel. Tasty Time with Zefranc was about a French dachshund named Zefranc who hosted a cooking show while his neighbor, a cat named Dom, tried to sneak the snacks he was preparing. Zefranc had a sous chef, a bird named Sue, of course, and this was important when we got to our second season. And Disney asked us to do foods from around the world. And for each episode, I would devise a way for Dom to sneak the snack. And we did our Mexican quesadilla episode. I borrowed a classic Benny routine. Dom disguised himself as a tortilla delivery man with a tortilla delivery for Sue. Sue? See? It was an homage, okay, a downright steal of the C Sue routine. And here's a page as it was done from the script. Originally, it was much longer, but I had a little discussion with the Disney executives, and they said, none of our audience will know Jack Benny. And I said, it doesn't really matter. It's funny whether or not anyone knows where it came from. And my executive finally agreed and allowed me to keep the routine, but convinced me to cut it down to its current length. After all, a page and a half for an extended gag is a bit much for a 3-minute cartoon whose entire script is about 5 pages. I cut it down, turned in the script, didn't hear anything else until a few weeks later when I was in LA for our final Zafranc recording session. I didn't usually go to the sessions, but I live in New York. Sessions are in LA. But when I heard this could be our last one, I took the trip because the 11-year-old inside of me wouldn't have forgiven me because Dom, our cat character, was voiced by Mark Hamill, Luke Skywalker himself. And when I saw Mark, he made special mention of the Seaside Sue routine that I snuck into the script. And he loved it because he is a fan of classic show business. Now, if I'm influenced by Jack Benny, what about Jim Henson? I knew that Jim, having been born in 1936, grew up as a child of radio and would have most likely listened to Jack on Sunday nights, along with a great deal of the rest of the country. But it wasn't until I started researching my book. There's my book, Sam and Friends, the story of Jim Henson's first television show, that I learned how much Benny and his gang influenced Jim. And as I explain in the book, which is available from Bear Manor Media, fine publishers of several Jack Benny books, Sam and Friends was a 5-minute show which aired weekdays, sometimes twice a day, sometimes once, and it aired in a great time slot, either before the NBC News with Huntley Brinkley or before Steve Allen's Tonight Show, sometimes both. And in the beginning, the show was mostly the Muppets lip-syncing to records. And this is where the Benny Gang comes in, starting with our old friend, Phil Harris. And here's Phil. We all know that guy. And here's Sam, the titular star of Sam and Friends. Now, according to a newspaper interview with Jim, Sam's very existence owes itself to our beloved band leader. And here's a clipping where Jim said he made Sam specifically to lip sync to Phil Harris records. Now, Sam was created with shoulders, which a lot of Muppets really don't have. And those shoulders could move around as Sam danced and delivered his smooth Phil Harris vocals, because Sam really didn't speak other than that. While no Sam and Friends kinescopes featuring Phil Harris records actually survived, there are only about 15 shows that exist. Here's a brief clip to show you Sam in action. So you can imagine, instead of Sam and Kermina as he is dressed, instead of them doing Old Black Magic as sung by Louis Prima and Kelly Smith, imagine Sam doing a Phil Harris tune.
Stay away, but what can I do? I hear your name and I'm aflame.
Pray the desire.
That only your kiss.
Put out the fire.
Now, as I researched the book, and I found Jim Henson's song lists, we found original acetate recordings, we found reel-to-reel tapes that Jim had recorded more than 400 episodes of Sam and Friends. I was amazed to find out exactly how many Phil Harris records were actually used on the show. Now, these are just the ones we know of. And a lot of familiar titles are going by, and those were all lip synced to by Sam and the rest of the Muppets. Yep, list goes on and on. Yep, and of course, that's what I like about the South and The Thing. And Phil's not the only one. Dennis Day was also heard on Sam and Friends. Now, we could only find one song. It doesn't mean that he didn't have more songs on the show, just that we could only find evidence that one was played. And record keeping was a little skittish back in those days. And of course, the Sportsman Quartet was heard. Jim really loved using quartets because it gave him an opportunity to have multiple characters doing fun things. And of course, the one and only Mel Blanc was heard on Sam and Friends. Now, these records aside, Sam and Friends as a show was also heavily influenced by Jack Benny's program. First of all, it's a show about putting on a show, just like Benny's show. Sometimes Sam and Friends focused on a performance, sometimes backstage storyline, sometimes a mixture of both. And this would be something that Jim would continue to explore throughout his career. More on that later. Now, another big similarity for most of its run, Sam and Friends had a single sponsor, the SK Meat Company. And just like the Benny Show, Sam and Friends included what is referred to as an integrated commercial, in which the show's characters would perform the commercial. And just like the Benny Show, Sam and Friends characters and their commercials were created to be funny and poke fun at the product. It's when you're dealing with the Schulerberg and Kirtle Meat Company, SK, it wasn't hard to poke fun at the product. Music, as with the Benny program, music was a major part of Sam and Friends. As I previously mentioned, sometimes it was featuring artists that were heard on the Benny Show. And when the Muppets finally started to speak, they performed parody sketches, ranging from their own version of The Untouchables to various fairy tales. And of course, as with the indelible characters of the Jack Benny program, Jim Henson created an ensemble cast of characters, each with their unique traits. This too would become a hallmark of Jim Henson's work for decades to come. Now, so as you can see, as I researched my book, I couldn't help but notice that Jim Henson, whether knowingly or not, was inspired by Jack Benny and his cast and creative team. Now, as for the direct connection to Jim Henson and Jack Benny, we dig a little deeper into the Henson archives. And we find by the mid-1960s, Jim had moved from Washington, D.C., where Sam and Friends aired, to New York City, began to work on variety shows, and eventually earned a contract with ABC to develop television programs and specials. And he brainstormed assorted shows, including possible holiday specials. Now, this is one of those projects, Jim Henson's Muppet TV special that never was, the Muppet Income Tax Show, with proposed special guest star Jack Benny. I created this image to show you how Jim Henson intended to start the show. Jack would welcome us to the show inside of a dollar bill and tell us his plan to turn Income Tax Day into a national holiday and sell merchandise and make enough money to pay his own tax bill. And as Jack speaks, a Muppet choir would sing traditional income tax carols. Now, after this opening, the show would consist of a series of sketches. First, there was a singing troubadour who would strum on his lute, announcing that tax day is coming, and a dark shadow descends upon a scale model of a town, and a dark, monstrous figure approaches, stomping on everything in sight. But the troubadour stops the action and he insists that tax day isn't like that dark, monstrous figure. The figure is revealed to be a smiling Uncle Sam, who reminds us that tax time is your opportunity to participate in the running of the country. Another sketch is Jack as an executive. There's a corporate conference, and Jack is trying to figure out how the corporation can pay as little tax as possible. And after rejecting a few possible schemes, the other executives at the table, the Muppets, decide that Jack should be the scapegoat. And they decide the corporation will lie and cheat on their tax return and hold Jack responsible for any consequences. And as the executives praise themselves and each other for their financial ingenuity, Jack's house, car, wife, and other belongings are divvied up among them. Next, the Ballad of John Hay is a bluegrass musical number telling the story of an everyman who gets into tax trouble when he relies on the advice of a shady accountant. And the chorus always insists, everybody does it, it's the American way, John Hay. And one small transgression builds up to a series of missteps that lands him a long stay in jail. The next sketch in the pitch is Jack Benny as the prehistoric tax collector taking various parts of a caveman's recent hunt as tax payment. Slowly but steadily, Jack wields his meat cleaver to chop off parts of a giant mastodon for various city, state, and local taxes, even allowing for deductions when Taxman Jack is through. The caveman who killed the animal is left only with one foot and the animal's right ear. Next is a musical number, a song performed by a long line of taxpayers filing into the IRS to make their payments, and when they enter, they're carrying stacks of money and piggy banks, and when they exit, they're wearing undershirts and barrels and weeping as they continue to sing the old standard. Now, computers were pretty new when this was being pitched, and there was a sketch that had two IRS computers that were installed to double-check each other, and one of them finds $1 million loss, which in fact was skimmed off by the other computer in a tradition of Muppet sketches. Ending in explosions, the computers destroy each other. And finally, the show ends with an elaborate sketch in which Jack is called into the IRS to explain some of his deductions. Now, unlike the friendly IRS men who appear on Jack's show, the Muppet auditor has a more evil undertone. It feigns a grin of false friendship and artificial warmth. And as organ music plays, the Muppet taxman puts his hand on Jack's shoulder and assures him that the government cares about him. It leads into a whole big "We Care" musical number, which builds and builds as more and more IRS workers join in, and eventually Uncle Sam, John Hay, all of the other characters from the previous sketches join in. And by the end of the finale, Jack and the Muppet taxpayers have paid their taxes, and we are proud to be part of the American way. Now, if you'd like to read the entire proposal, through the courtesy of the Jim Henson Company a few years back, we were able to include the entire text in the May-August 2013 issue of the Jack Benny Times. So be sure to contact Laura to buy a back issue. Now, how close was all of this to actually happening? No one knows for sure, but we do know that when Jim's variety show appearances started to bring him out to California, he did cross paths with Mr. Benny. Now, on September 14th, 1972, I was about to say September 24th, which is Jim Henson's birthday, but September 14th, 1972, the Muppets appeared on the Flip Wilson Show, along with another guest.
Ladies and gentlemen, before I say goodnight, I'd like to take a moment to thank my guests. And Jack, it's been a pleasure. I've always admired you, and you're such a fantastic man and really a giant. And I hope we have the pleasure again.
I hope so. Thank you.
And now I'd like to thank Mr. Jim Henson of the Muppets. Jim Henson. And Miss Belle Bell.
And then on January 23rd, 1974, on The Tonight Show, Kermit and Jim favored the audience with "It's Not Easy Being Green," while sitting on the panel besides someone else.
When green is all there is to be, it could make you wonder why. But why wonder, why wonder? I'm green, it'll do fine. It's beautiful, and I think it's what I want to be. That's the song.
Yay.
Who forgot the lyrics?
Who knows?
Who forgot the lyrics? It's his own song. No, I scrambled a couple of
I'll show you how,
I forgot the
how
lyrics.
far
I
gone I
forgot
am
the
in the
lyrics.
show. I'm sitting watching the dumb frog. Getting wrapped
This
up.
little louse is the hit of the show.
So Jack was clearly charmed by Kermit, and by this time Jim had actually produced his first holiday special, The Muppets Valentine Show, with guest Mia Farrow. So I like to think that if Jack Benny had not passed away in December of that year, it's quite possible that we may have seen the Muppet Income Tax Show, or at the very least, Jack could have popped up on Jim's big project of 1976, The Muppet Show. We're going to take a brief look at some of Jack's friends and contemporaries who made an appearance.
Milton Berle, 20 seconds to curtain. Stand by for makeup.
Stand by for what?
You don't know what you're saying. Yes, I do, Bergen. I can read your lips. Oh, that learns him up.
Excuse me, Mr. Burns. Remember me? I'm Gonzo.
Oh, one of the Marx brothers. Groucho, Chico, Harpo, and Gonzo.
No. I'm the great Gonzo. I'm in show business, too.
Well, how did you get a name like Gonzo?
Oh, my mother gave it to me.
Your mother?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she died 2 years before I was born.
Well, if she died 2 years before you were born, how could she give you that name?
Well, she left a note to
your
my
father.
yeah.
I thought so.
And I want you to know, Miss Piggy, I'm terribly sorry that I said I knew you when you were thin.
Oh, didn't you? That's all right.
Oh, thank you. I never knew you when you were thin.
Say, Hope, what are you doing out here? You're not a real cowboy.
Are you kidding? I got a big spread in Texas.
Yeah, got one south of the border, too.
Oh, a fat joke, huh?
Yeah, I suppose now you'll get even with a swayback joke.
Well, that last joke goes sway back.
Oh, I can't take this much longer. When's this song end?
We got 8 bars to go. One to ride to the ridge where the west commences. Gaze at the moon till I lose my senses. And look at harbors and I can't stand fences. Don't dance me
Now, imagine if Jack had lived. Imagine if Buck Benny was riding that horse instead of Bob Hope. Now, just as there was a Benny influence on Sam and Friends, I think there's a good deal of Jack Benny and Jack Benny program DNA in The Muppet Show. While there was no integrated commercial, this was a syndicated program, but there were several other striking similarities. Once again, this is a show about making a show. And with The Muppet Show, it was about making a show. The joke was that this was a show being made on a very tight budget, and Kermit wasn't paying anybody anything. And the reality was The Muppet Show was one of the most expensive syndicated shows on television. But the gag was they had no money to spend, nothing to spend on talent or sets. And that was sort of a running gag. We also had Kermit's gang. We started to define the Muppet characters more than on Sam and Friends. Kermit had his own gang of oddball characters here. And while he usually came off looking like the most normal one of the group, he would always point out, if he was so normal, why did he hire all of the other weirdos? We have a guest star, And just as guest stars were an important part of the Benny Show, both in radio and television, each episode of The Muppet Show had a special guest star. And just like Jack gave his guests a chance to do something they weren't known for, either Gary Cooper singing or Fred McMurray playing sax or Kirk Douglas playing the banjo, Jim Henson did the same thing for his guests, whether it was opera star Beverly Sills tap dancing or Phyllis Diller playing the saxophone. And speaking of music, there was lots of it, about 4 or 5 songs per episode. It's one of the reasons it took a while to get to Disney Plus. Lots of music licensing had to happen. Now, Muppet Show is essentially vaudeville, where Jack got his start. They'd bring in a headliner each week, program a bunch of Muppet acts around them, but they also had a flexible format, like the Benny Show did. Sometimes there was a story, sometimes it was just a variety show. And some episodes took what was usually a very thin backstage storyline and extended it into a theme or a book show. When Liza Minnelli appeared, there was a murder mystery throughout. Carol Burnett had to navigate her guest shot around a dance marathon that Gonzo had cooked up. And like the Benny Show, Jack had his Vault, Maxwell, and Cimarron roles. Muppet Show had its share of running gags, from Gonzo's opening attempts at blowing his horn and the show logo to Piggy's karate chops, Scooter's uncle threatening to tear down the theater, that sort of thing. And if you're not familiar with the Muppet Show, why aren't you? But if you're really not, I urge you to watch on Disney Plus. Most of the episodes are streaming, so you can check them out. Now, I'm going to end with a personal remembrance. In the early 1990s, shortly after Jim Henson passed away, the Henson Company made a deal with ABC Television to do 10 2-minute bits to air on Good Morning America, little entertainment segments, not unlike the Sam and Friends episodes. And we couldn't be too timely because we were producing them in advance. And I was fortunate to be a writer on these. I did one at the opening of baseball season featuring complaining Muppet baseballs, and we did a presidential debate where actual mudslinging was involved. And our longtime Muppet head writer, Jerry Jewell, wanted to include a musical performance in one of the sketches. And I remembered the Mel Blanc record of Stan Freberg's song Money, which had been performed on Sam and Friends by Mel Blanc, and then it was done later on The Muppet Show. And I suggested we use that for the Tax Day sketch. Now, Jerry, who had worked with Jim on that Muppet Income Tax Day special treatment with Jack Benny, the show with Jack Benny, didn't work with Jack Benny on it. So Jerry incorporated that song into a sketch in which Fozzie Bear took the role that was Jack Benny's in the treatment, being on the receiving end of an audit. So as you watch, imagine Jack taking Fozzie's place and think of what it might have been.
Sir, in all my years as an internal revenue auditor, I have never seen such outrageous deductions. $575 for a rubber chicken?
Oh, yeah, well, it's a professional model. See, I use it in my act. Ah, funny, huh?
No.
Right.
$248 for banana peels?
Oh, can't we just let that slip?
$400 for custard pies?
Half-baked, huh? Oh, Mr. Auditor, just tell me, please, what does the IRS want?
You want to know what the IRS wants?
Don't want no lovin'. Don't want no kissin'. Don't want no gal to call me honey. Don't want my name in the Hall of Fame. Just want a big fat pile of money. Give us that almighty dollar for that let us hear us holler. Give us buckets full of ducats. Let us walk around and walk in Mazuma, El De Niro. Wanna be a millionaire. Give us money, 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 money. I'm a greenback collector. I'm a paper bill inspector. I'm a savage for that cabbage man. To me, it's golden nectar. Pour that filter lucre on me. Spread those loving germs upon me.
You want money, 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 money.
By Jove, I think he's got it.
So let me see here. You want to roll around upon it, stuff those bank rags in your bonnet.
Any kind, just so some president has got his picture on it. Let me feel it, let me hold it, let me sit there, let me fold it. Give us money, 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 money.
'cause that's our idea of pleasure. Give us one buck, Gilbert, just let us count it at our leisure.
Oh, let me live in regal splendor with that love and legal tender.
Give us money, 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 money. Tell him about it.
If they ever plant trees of pluribus uno, we want to be the folks who are sent out to Bruno.
We want your money, money, money.
All of your money, money, money. We want your money, 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 money.
Ha! He forgot one. Ha!
And that's about it. I wasn't able to pull up any chat, so I don't know if anybody was getting any of it.
I can tell you right now that it seems like everybody has had a wonderful time, Craig, because I've seen the chat blow up from 25 messages to 70 messages to 1 billion messages.
Whoa. Let's try that.
If I could quickly reclaim host from you.
Yes, please do.
In the order to, I think you may actually click on my little box. But I want to ask you some questions here after we get hosting services back up there. But the very notion that you were able to kind of like gather all of this material is pretty remarkable. Doesn't look like I can press the reclaim button. I think you may have to click on my box and say make host. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah,
and that's where I'll ask a question. And
there you go. You are the host now.
Wonderful. All right, now I'm going to put you on the spotlight for everybody, but don't worry, I'll be right next to you. So, Craig, how long did it take you to gather all the material to get this thing running?
Yeah, I started, I approached the Henson family and the Henson Company in, I think, 2019. Or I may have started in 2018. We started doing the research in earnest in 2019. So it was a good 3 years of research and writing. The book came out in September of 2022. So in between, I had to take a brief pause for COVID and to readjust the research protocols. And then I had a quadruple bypass surgery in there somewhere. So I had to recuperate from that. But it took a while to dig up things. Karen Falk is the head of the Jim Henson Company archives and really dug up a lot of those things.
Wow.
I was, one of the things that made this book really possible, especially the researching the Phil Harris songs, there's a list, one of the things about the book, there's a whole episode guide listing all the songs that were performed that we know of. Jim Henson started recording reel-to-reel audio tapes of the show starting in 1958. So while there are only 15 video episodes, there are more than 400 audio recordings of the show.
Wow. That's remarkable, because you only see brief clips of Sam and Friends and other stuff in various documentaries.
Yeah, there's only about an hour, less than an hour of footage that survives.
Yeah, it's... if you watch those things along with, I think it's Timepiece, his short film, you get a sense of the variety of artistry that Henson had. But like I love always going back to that Carson appearance where they're both sitting there together, and it's just kind of like something you grew up with in childhood, and then something you picked up along the way, which would be Jack in this case, just being in the same room is mind-boggling, to say the least.
And I used to think, in getting ready for this presentation, I was trying to track down the timeline with Karen, the archivist, and I used to think that the Muppet Income Tax Show was a result of Jim appearing with Jack on The Tonight Show or meeting him at Flip Wilson, but apparently the pitch document predated those appearances, that Jim had wanted to do this even before he met Jack.
Wow. So it might have been a good happenstance that, like, being a Jack fan would have bled into it.
Yeah.
Like, how things bleed into your artistry.
Yeah.
But you've obviously talked your love about the Muppets, and we're gonna. I want to find out And if anybody has any questions here for the next for the following 10 minutes we have, please enter them into the Q&A function so we can easily pull them up. But I have a question. Move aside from Henson for a second. What's your favorite Jack Benny thing ever that maybe non-Muppet related?
Oh, that's a toughie. I mean, I love so much of it. I think the Christmas shopping special, the episode, whether done in radio or television, I think I love that because, the Mel Blanc character in it has this gradual turn and gets so dark so quickly.
It's one of the bleakest endings to a Christmas special that has ever existed.
Yeah.
I've shown it to people, and they cannot comprehend how they got away with that in the 60s.
And everybody in that show has such great business. The whole thing of Rochester shopping for his boss, the whole thing. Yeah.
No.
What kind of man is he? Well, I'm afraid there's not much left. That's him.
Well, we do have a question here. Michael Beal here wants to know the German version of the Muppet Show used dub audio. Did they let Victor Borgia do his own dubbing since he speaks fluent German?
I don't think so. Not as far as I know. They also did, there's an episode, I think it's the German Muppet Show, where they replaced a couple of appearances. They took the Twiggy episode, and then I think the German distributor wouldn't take the Muppet Show for German distribution unless there was some German content in it.
Mm-hmm.
So they obliged by taking the Twiggy episode and taking out one or two songs and putting in a German singer, Mary Roos, I think was her name. And they sort of, okay, we'll put in a couple of, put in a performance by Mary Roos, and then I'll make it German. So,
and we have one from Steve Shea. He wants to know, did you see Jack's influence on Sesame Street at all?
Just a little bit. A lot of times those takes, the clip I showed with Bob, especially the human characters, when they would be reacting to the Muppets, it was very similar to the way that Jack would react to the weirdos that he had in his gang.
Mm-hmm.
So you would see a lot of long takes, and they would put, I believe that the Sesame Street writers would put in stuff like Jack Benny take or, little guidance. So it was more about the reactions as opposed to any specific Jack Benny content.
I've thought about this from having gotten to work with you on prepping the panel and making sure everything flowed. I always thought it'd be great if Jack met the Count and taught him how to count. That would be a fun little bit.
You could hire the Count to work in his vault.
Ha, 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 ha. 1, 2, 3 years down here. Ha, ha, ha,
the Count has a great Twitter feed. All he does is count his tweets. It's like
5,000 tweets. And then I kind of wanted to know, when within the scope of the Muppets territory, you've done the book about Sam and Friends. Do you have any other Muppet related projects that you're working on, or anything non-Muppet related?
Well, we're talking about, if I can get the permissions and the approvals, I've reached out to Henson to see in my book, which I saw someone in the chat said that they ordered. Thank you very much. You can go to samandfriendsbook.com and find out how you can get a free autographed book plate and bookmark and all that stuff.
Yeah.
The people really responded. I printed 5 scripts from the show in the book, and people have told me that they like seeing that. So I'm going to see about the feasibility of doing a Sam and Friends script book. With our friends of Bear Manor have had success with script books.
Yeah.
Kathy can attest to that.
Yeah. I would love to. I mean, now that you've told me how much audio there is, I'm like, I want to hear the audio.
That's another thing that's a little tougher to deal with because of all the rights and permissions and the music and stuff. But I have talked to Karen at the Henson Archives they have various arrangements with different distributors and shout factories among them. And I think we are going to talk about, it would be kind of cool now to do, you could do a Jim Henson Sam and Friends LP,
Yeah.
Use a combination of Jim's original audio as well as the records that he played.
Yeah. And it's because for anybody who doesn't know out there who Shout Factory is, like just off the offhand, they actually put out the Jack Benny, the Lost Episode set, but they are very detail oriented and provide like add-ons. Like for the horror community, they'll like put together a John Carpenter record to go with the John Carpenter film. And like hearing that, it sounds like it'd be a great idea to, if they had a way to do it, release the available Sam and Friends episodes and then have an add-on of the LP of some of the audio.
So all of that stuff, it's up to the Henson Company, the Henson family. And also one of the unique situations is that Kermit is owned by Disney. So even to do my book, I had to get permissions from Disney to include Kermit and images of Kermit. And they were very nice. And they allowed me to do it. They didn't charge me a license fee, and Henson didn't charge me a license fee. Everyone wanted to have this happen as a labor of love. But it is complicated. So I hope, and I don't own the material. So I hope that there's a future for the Sam and Friends stuff. And then I've also discussed with Karen Falk, the Henson archivist, about working with her on possibly doing a book about Jim Henson's 1960s, sort of the next level. And then we can really go into the stuff like Jim Henson's film Timepiece, which a lot of people have never seen, and it was nominated for an Academy Award. People know him for the Muppets, and they don't know he had this whole side as an experimental filmmaker.
Timepiece is such a trip. I got it on iTunes Movies when it was available there when I was still in high school, and it taught me a lot about editing. It taught me a lot about how to collage a piece together. Yeah, it's a remarkable.
We just did the Henson Company. I nudged them and begged them to do a full restoration. So a couple of years they did do a 4K restoration of Timepiece from all the surviving elements, and it's beautiful. And I'm hoping that gets out there.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Craig.